All right, we're going to turn now to the AAC title game. And this is probably my top play on the board for the weekend, under 53.5 between Cincy and Houston. And Ianniello, I'm just going to throw out my rationale here, and I want you to respond to it in real time. So you can watch Cincy play. You don't even need to look at the stats, and you can see how dominant they are in defense. But if you are interested in the stats, top 10 scoring defense, total defense, yards per play allowed, opponent completion percentage, yards per attempt, it goes on and on and on. Then when you switch over to the Houston defense, they're incredibly disruptive. Top 15 in sack percentage and interception percentage, nearly 7.5 tackles for loss per game. So they're living in opponents' backfields. They're fantastic against the run, and they were never burned this entire season by a dual threat quarterback. And Desmond Ridder, depending on what you think of him as a runner, he has had some explosive games this year. And when he gets into the read option game, he is able to burn teams, particularly in the red zone. And I'm glad that the red zone has come up because both teams are top 15 in red zone defense in terms of scoring percentage allowed. And that's really the big thing here. When you're looking for a total in that 45 to 55 point range, it really comes down to, are those red zone opportunities cashed in? Are they cashed in as field goals or touchdowns? Can the other team take the ball away? And the last part of this for me, having watched a lot of Cincinnati football this year, when they have those quote unquote big games, their non-conference schedule boiled down to Indiana, who was tremendous last season. And there was hope this year that they would be a great pelt to put on the wall for them. Against Indiana and against Notre Dame, 0 points in the first quarter of both games. And you saw Desmond Ridder play really tight, bouncing passes, having some issues at the line of scrimmage, a lot of false starts. They just didn't look confident offensively. Their defense always comes to play. They have superstars at all three levels. But offensively, it's clear to me that Desmond Ridder sometimes, not necessarily that the stage is too big, but I think he presses a little too much. And then finally, the last stat I want to throw out there, Houston has been playing really well in the last 2 months on offense. Clayton Tune has taken it to the next level. But here's the thing. They haven't faced a top 40 defense all season. And the best defense they faced in terms of total defense was Navy, and they were 41st. Every other team outside of that, 60th or worse. I think it's going to be a total shell shock situation going up against a Cincinnati defense that can just line up and just play man defense on the perimeter. They get into the backfield. They're going to put pressure on Tune to make plays happen. And when the ball's in the air, they take it away. Sauce Gardner is playing his way into a top 15 NFL draft selection. So I think both of these teams are in for a world of hurt when they have the football. And because of that, 53.5, I'm all about the under here. I actually had it at 48.5 in my power rankings. So to go over that key number of 7 touchdowns is a nice get for me. I love this one. This is my play of the week.
Yeah, I totally love it. And just, for people, anyone writing down our plays here, obviously we're going to count Breeze's pick as our official play for the what are we calling it? The G5, Conference 5, High 5.
That sounds right.
But just to throw out a little bonus play, one that I'm playing, and I actually think very much correlates with your play, is I'm taking Houston plus 10.5 because, as you mentioned, this Cincinnati defense is elite. They get a ton of headlines. They have, 2 studs in Gardner and Bryant. They're 13th in the country in success rate. Houston is 4th in success rate and 6th in yards per play. So they've been better. And like I said, Gardner and Bryant are awesome. They both are graded as top 15 corners in the country per PFF. Well, Houston corner Marcus Jones is 3rd. He's tied for 3rd with Roger McCreary at Auburn, who is a stud. So, and they're actually kind of different where like Houston's strength definitely is more on the back end. Or Cincinnati, their strength is more on the back end, more on the coverage side of it. But what makes Houston so good against the pass, as you mentioned, is that front 7 is so good. They are 2nd in the entire country in passing success. They are averaging 3.5 sacks per game, over 7 tackles per loss. They average 23 quarterback pressures per game, and they do it from every angle, which makes them so dangerous. They're not this, Aiden Hutchinson pin his ears back or Kayvon Thibodeau. They have D'Anthony Jones and David Anini on the outside. Both of them are absolute monsters. And then on the inside, they have Logan Hall and Latrell Bankston who come up the middle. And then I mentioned it when I was talking about the defensive coordinator. They have this guy, Derek Parrish, who they move all over the field. He plays defensive end. He plays linebacker. He plays fullback on offense. He roams the field. He has 7 sacks this year. So their front 7 is so good and they're so dangerous. They're 7th in line yards. They're 4th at creating havoc. And the biggest area of weakness on the Cincinnati team is their offensive line. They're just 82nd in pass blocking. They're 46th in line yards. And you mentioned, Ritter, who, he gets a lot of love and maybe ends up in New York. I know Colin Wilson has that fat ticket on him, so I'm sure he's hoping it. And yeah, Ritter's definitely more dangerous with his legs and has been effective running this year. But when you look at them passing, Clayton Tune has 26 touchdowns and 8 interceptions this year. Desmond Ridder has 27 touchdowns and 8 interceptions. So they're pretty much a wash. Tune has a higher completion percentage, and Clayton Tune is great as a 91.7 passer grade at PFF. Ritter's 88.4. So, you could argue Tune has been the better passer this year. And yeah, the competition has been a little bit worse for Houston. But we've seen it over the past couple of weeks where we're waiting for Cincinnati. I think it's very clear this Cincinnati team is not as good as last year's. I think anyone that watched both of them would say that. They're not as good. And they're probably going to get into the playoff. I hope they get into the playoff. I do. But they haven't made that dominant statement we'd expect from, the G5 god who's just pummeling their, the problem with having weaker competition is you have to beat the brakes off them. And they haven't. They beat Navy by 7. They beat Tulane by 19. They beat Tulsa by 8. They beat South Florida, who's horrific, by 17. They did look good against SMU and ECU late in the year, but they just haven't been able to pull away. And now they're going to beat, a much better than all of those teams, Houston team, by more than 10.5. And then there's the big elephant in the room. We talked about Billy Napier. Look, I'm sure we've all had these situations, maybe in high school, where you're dating this girl because she's cute and she's in your homeroom, so you're always around her, you become good friends with her, and she's just she's always there, and you hang out with her all the time, and you're dating her. But then the hot chick you've always had a crush on suddenly becomes single, and yeah, you're still loyal, but your buddy's texting you, "Hey man, you see who's single?" And you're like, "Yeah, I did see that. I noticed her Instagram's clear." I'm just saying, Luke Fickell has long said that he would leave Cincinnati for Notre Dame. Like, it's Notre Dame, Ohio State, Penn State are kind of his jobs. Notre Dame's open. And
so just to be clear, what would Notre Dame's thirst trap on Instagram be? Would it just be them DMing him pictures of the Golden Dome and Touchdown Jesus? Or what exactly are they sending him to get him all hot and bothered before kickoff of this game?
Yeah, probably clips of Rudy and touchdown Jesus. And don't be shocked if he got a text from the Notre Dame AD like, "You up?" So I'm just saying, I think Luke Fickell got a couple texts like, "You see who's single now?" And he's like, "Yeah, can't talk. I'm at the movies with my girl." But he knows who's single. And like I said, most of this comes down to on the field, but I also like having that little extra, distraction thrown into that mix, which I do think is the case.